millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everybody to episode 50 of Garden of Doom, and for the special 50th episode we have a really big get this week. The guest of the host of Earth Ancients podcast has both a national Facebook group of over 40,000 members and an international Facebook group of over 120,000 members, and they've been doing this for 7 years. Well, I let him talk about Earth Ancients and all the things that he's involved with, but there's a lot of overlap between things that this show covers sort of regularly, that their show covers all the time. So I think that the listeners of this show, especially longtime listeners of this show, would definitely enjoy their group as well. So without further ado, I welcome in Cliff Dunning. How are you today, Cliff?
Hi, Jeff. Nice to be here. I'm doing great.
Terrific. It's been really a pleasure to get you on. We chatted a little bit earlier. Thank you for your patience and your time with some of the technical issues that we were experiencing with Audition. But why don't you just start off by telling a little, you can do your own sell on Earth Ancients and some of the things you do, and tell us sort of like a description of the show and your topics.
Sure. Earth Ancients came out of 20 years as a program director for conferences here on the West Coast. I was the conference director for Whole Life Expo and New Living Expo. Whole Life in its prime was an 8-show yearly conference that was New York to San Francisco and everything in between. Featured a lot of the best-selling authors that I have on my show, people like Graham Hancock, Dr. Robert Schoch, and hundreds of others. And when that began to fade and my interest was waning, the technology behind podcasting started following me. And I was listening about 10 years ago to some of the early podcasts like Joe Rogan and people like that. And I thought, wow, this is a really great medium. And 7 years ago, I launched Earth Ancients, and with real rudimentary technology. I was using headset from my phone, earpods, and things like that. and just was interviewing people who I enjoyed. I had a great database of people, and from there, it just kept growing. And it covers a lot of interest. I've been interested in history for most of my life and have had the good fortune to travel through Mexico and Central America for a number of years. And so the podcast is a great place to not only talk to authors and research investigators, but to also get across a lot of my own interests in writing. I write articles for Ancient Origins magazine every month, and also online, and kind of contribute to other publications when they ask. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they were. So the show centers largely on the premise that there were ancient human civilizations well before recorded time, pre-Diluvian, maybe more than one Diluvian age, sort of counter to, there's a lot of similarities between that theory and the, let's just call it the ancient aliens theory, to, in the interest of time, except that instead of ancient aliens, the premise of your show is more that it was ancient humans, that we had prior ages of man and civilizations, which actually, if I'm not mistaken, exists in the lore of several peoples. I think the Aztecs and the Mayans both talk about this being like the fifth age of man, and there are other cultures like that as well. I know that the Egyptians and the Sumerians both have their king's line going back hundreds of thousands of years. So, I mean, it's a big difference in philosophy. It's almost like whether Jesus is the Son of God or Jesus isn't the Son of God, that big, but after it, the rest of the religious doctrine sort of, is the same. A lot of the analysis is the same. So you have guests that are on the other side of that philosophical debate or scientific debate, whatever we want to call it, and guests in other areas as well. I want to lead people to believe that in 7 years you've only covered this topic. You don't. You have spiritualists. You have people who write about Atlantis. You've you've had people on crystals. You've had science. So you have all sorts of things as well. But a few of the things that you certainly focus on is a word I never heard before I listened to your show, and that is telluric energy. So what is telluric energy?
Telluric energy fields are energy coming from the Earth. The Earth develops its own gravity, and within the gravity there are sub-levels of energy, gravity being the main energy. A telluric field bubbles up from what is called a ley line, and the Earth has a system, kind of like a you can consider it like a circulation system, like our arterial system, the arteries of our body. The Earth has the same kind of arterial system, and they're considered ley lines, which are energy lines. From a ley line, there are spots that are focused, and you can actually measure this energy coming out of the ground, and when it leaves the ground, it's called a telluric field. A lot of the older civilizations actually understood this, the Maya being the most prevalent. We think the Egyptians also understood telluric energy because there's evidence from a number of forensic engineers that the pyramids built on top of a massive telluric field, which is a ley line. But I've studied the temples and the pyramids of the Maya, and their whole scientific base is designed around pyramids over telluric fields. And what these pyramids do is actually collect and intensify the energy of a telluric field and then pass it through. And what we don't know is how they use that energy. We have a somewhat of an idea. But that's basically a brief outline of what a telluric field is.
Well, so before I move ahead, did I do a fair job of sort of describing Earth Ancients?
Yeah, Earth Ancients is a look at history, but from a less than orthodox view. So in other words, we have archaeologists, anthropologists, but most of the time we're looking at engineered data. And this is what the problem is. The reason I started Earth Ancients is that our history is very much questionable. And when I say history, it's who built the pyramids and why, who built the temples, why would they build temples over telluric fields. There's a whole science that is not being leveraged when we talk about our history. And to say that the pre-dynastic Egyptians, the Maya, the people who built Stonehenge were hunter-gatherers is really a misnomer, because there's a science and physics behind what they developed that we're just beginning to understand now. And the only way we know this is because we're coming up to speed in developing analytic tools that can sense these telluric fields, that can sense ley lines. And so Earth Ancients is based on a collective of science that isn't incorporated with anthropology or archaeology.
Okay, good. It occurred to me that I'm sitting here spending a couple minutes describing your show when I have you here.
You did pretty well, actually.
I've listened for several years, and I think actually it's helpful to the audience to hear from you, your view of what your show is, and mine. Although I didn't practice it, so I'm sure I left some stuff out. Well, I'm sure you think about it every day. So the term ley lines, I of course have heard the term ley lines. I think most people have, or at least most people that listen to this show have. If you don't recognize it, you've heard it. Yes, you saw the movie Ghostbusters. I think at least 2 out of 3 of them talk about ley lines. In the most recent reboot with the female protagonist, they actually laid out a 3D map, and the ley lines sort of illuminated almost like a basketball on the Earth. And that was sort of how they talked about where the portals were. And if you're also not familiar with ley lines, the term specifically, you've heard it when you've heard people talking about that there are points on Earth that connect, like the pyramids to Stonehenge and to the Washington Mall and to other Angkor Wat and things like that. That's all ley lines and geometry. And sometimes you hear the term sacred geometry, which, I mean, sacred or just geometry probably doesn't matter for the purposes of this show. Sacred, there's 2 ways of interpreting sacred. One is the divine, religious inspired, that it was, intelligent design. The other is that's just the way that the Earth's energy lines work, and someone realized it, and the sacred just means special or something to be venerated, not necessarily divine. So
you said it yourself. These sacred places were venerated, and when you look at the Templar Knights, when they built the great cathedrals in France, they actually sit on ley lines, and the Templars developed and understood subtle energy. Now, one thing I want to mention is that a good way to explain ley lines is when you look at the human body. The ancient Chinese developed healing techniques looking at the meridians, and the meridians on the body are the energy centers that are not visibly detectable, but a good Chinese doctor can use needles and penetrate the skin and connect with one of these meridians for healing, for creativity, to open up various centers of the body that are collapsed or not functioning. And in the same way the human body has these energy centers, the Earth has ley lines, which are the Earth's meridians. So during the turn of the century, the English and the British actually began charting these sacred places like Stonehenge, excuse me, and also others. I mean, there's countless stone circles in the UK, in Britain, and parts of Wales. They actually mapped those, and they actually also began looking at mapping areas outside of England, and these are the ley lines that we understand. So when the ancients found these places like Stonehenge, they were very much tuned in physically to feeling the vibrations. Now, today, we're so bombarded with unseen vibrations of cell towers, cell phones, radiation, the computers and things like that, that unless we really focus, we can't feel subtle energy. But I can tell you from a fact that there are certain pyramids and temples in Egypt, in Mexico, and in Central America that if you walk up to them and you either touch them or go up the stairs and stand for a little bit, you'll feel the energy in your body. They're still turned on. So that's a way to understand telluric field and also the ley line.
It's almost like a symmetry. If you want to take out geometry, it's almost like sacred symmetry. When you talk about the meridians in the body, it sounded almost like a little bit of overlap with sort of like the yoga concept of chakras. Is there any relationship there?
Complete connection. Yeah, the chakras are the energy centers. There's 7 of them in the body, within the body, but there's also extended chakras that are outside of the body. You might call those aura, the auric field, and so forth. But yeah, the chakras are extremely important. And these are other points that are not discussed or not considered in the West. And this is why I tell people to be very careful when you go to your doctor, because they don't understand. I'm talking about allopathic doctors now. Remember, allopathy is cut, irradiate, and chemically induce with drugs. So that's how they heal. The Chinese and other ancient methods of healing address the subtle energy of the body. And when you have a healing from them, they're addressing the mechanisms on how the body works. That's why a lot of times those healings are much more profound and long-lasting. Be it acupuncture or herbal medicine that addresses the energy fields of the body, those kinds of healings are much more profound than dosing somebody with drugs. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
To new listeners of this show, there's an episode, I think it's 29, but it's called something like Physician Heal Thyself, something like that. And there was a doctor on a Doctor of Chiropractic who very much was a proponent of more alternative medications. Now, I will say, I don't think that show was particularly entertaining, but it was extremely informative and educational. So if you're interested in hearing from a practitioner of about 50 years, he was on. Also, I have a recorded show that hasn't dropped yet, but shall at some point in the near future with a true homeopath holistic practitioner who talks about a lot of the same things, but almost like practical applications, what you eat, what you do, how you heal yourself. So aside from what Cliff just said, there are other sources, I mean, also outside this show too, but within this show that's going to help with that journey too. So I had a guest on a few weeks back, and he was looking at sacred places very much from a scriptural and sacred evangelical perspective, but indicated that on the 33rd parallel, there are these portals of almost like anti-energy, like almost anti-positive energy, like the Devil's Triangle and Area 51 and the Bermuda Triangle were all on the same parallel. And then somewhere else I saw somebody say that there were 12, and they named the Bermuda Triangle. The other guy said 4, one guy said 12. I don't know if either one of them is entirely accurate or if it's true or not. But do you know anything? Is there anything special about the 33rd and a third parallel?
I don't follow that, but what I do follow is that in certain cities of Egypt, and one of the cities is Luxor, there is a temple there that has they tell us that there's a stargate, and the stargate sits on top of one of these telluric fields, and there was a time when that temple was fully active, and if you did some form of meditation and also energy manipulation, you could walk through that door and be transported to another part of the Earth or another part of the of the cosmos, like another planet, quite easily. And this gets back to a whole nother science, the science I keep talking about that we don't understand. So stargates are also seen in Mayan temples, as well as recently it was mentioned that in some of the early Sumerian temples they had stargates. So, we have TV and movies about them, but if they actually were active is anyone's guess. Now, when we go to Egypt every year, our guide, Muhammad Imbrium, is very outspoken about these stargates. In fact, there's a very famous temple in Dendera. It's called the Hathor Temple. And when you get to the top floor, just before you get to the roof, there is a huge door. And above the door is a complete rendition of the astrological cycle. And the French in the 1700s took part of that, and you can see it in the Louvre, a museum in Paris. But the Stargate in that temple apparently was so active that they used it on a regular basis. The priests would send pharaohs and the royal family all over the place using that Stargate. And I actually had a chance to touch it. And I'm fairly sensitive to energy. I didn't feel anything, but we had a couple people a few years ago that actually touched the door and they got zapped. Like you zap somebody. So something's going on there, And this wall is made out of red granite. It's beautifully carved, but red granite is one of the hardest igneous rocks in the world. So it's a beautiful door.
I hope they didn't have pacemakers.
Exactly.
On that same parallel, I just remembered that the gentleman. By the way, the episode again. I keep saying for new listeners because thankfully our listenership has increased like 500% in the last couple of months because we. Cool. Yeah, thankful to the Wrestling Soup Network and to the Rational Rage Network, which picked us up and introduced us to a lot more people, which is great. But the episode I'm talking about is The Giant Revelation, and that guest is Reverend Jim Williamson. And I'm not saying that you necessarily have to agree with him, but it's interesting stuff to listen to. But one of the places he said on the same parallel was a mountain, and I'm ashamed I don't remember the name of the mountain, but it's like in northern Lebanon on the Syrian border. I'm wondering maybe like Amran comes to mind.
Mount Amrat.
That's the one. Yeah. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, that's where they believe they found years ago. About 10 years ago, I had a salvage engineer who wrote a book about Mount Ararat, and he proposed that he had found Noah's Ark there, and he found what looked like the remains of a massive hull of a ship up in the mountains, way up in the mountains.
And this is not Ararat. This is a different mountain. This is not Ararat, just for the listeners.
Oh, okay, yeah. But anyhow, there is some really weirdness up in those mountains. There's a lot of UFO activity. There's a lot of strange electrical discharges, unusual lightning storm in a part of the world that is fairly dry and temperate. So strangeness going on there.
And that episode had a lot to do with, it was sort of tied to the Nephilim Anthropology Conference in the UK, and it had a lot to do with the Nephilim and the giants, which to me, I find these things to be inseparable from talking about the Anunnaki. I find there to be so many parallels. But I think the portal, in if I remember correctly, in this case, it was a portal, but also a way to get to the inner Earth, where he surmised that the giants either live now or emerged from. He took a very literal version of the bosom of Abraham, that it was actually that the bosom meant like a wallet where you basically held your stuff close to your bosom back in those times. And so when they said the bosom, it wasn't like metaphorical, I keep you close to me, that it actually meant a pocket, and it was a pocket in the earth. It was, anyway, people can listen for themselves. But and actually he's going to be on a future episode. I've actually already recorded it, and he goes into that again, even though that show was supposed to be on scripture and science fiction, which it mostly was, but he did go into his other stuff too, which is okay as well. And obviously I need a reminder. So some of the other sacred places, I mean, I've heard Angkor Wat, I've heard of, obviously Machu Picchu, but it seems like they found circles, I know, in the Great Lakes, in southern Africa, throughout southern Africa, we've got circles, and it seems like circle, obviously I always say it wrong, but Göbekli Tepe has
Göbekli Tepe, yeah.
Göbekli Tepe. It seems like a lot of the structures there were circular as well, or at least the communal central feature was circular. And then I think like 20 miles or 20 kilometers away, they found a similar site that may be larger, or at least similar. So these circles seems to be one of those universal pan-cultural things, which I don't believe that much in coincidences with that kind of thing.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe is a really fascinating place, and the historians are still questioning the validity. It was dated to over 12,000 years ago, and it's so sophisticated for that time frame. And the problem that Orthodox science has with it, Orthodox archaeologists have with it, is that in their historical notions, 12,000 years ago, we were hunter and gatherers. We didn't have the brain capacity to build or carve megaliths, to chart cosmology, which is part of Göbekli Tepe. Now, the other thing that's really unique about Göbekli Tepe is that it's a huge, huge piece of property. They've only excavated maybe 15%. And there's a whole bunch of other circular structures that are close by that haven't been excavated. And it could really be quite telling about our future if they excavate another one of these circular encampments and they find detailed writing or scrolls of some kind that really let us know what was going on 12,000 years ago. Now, that's the end of the last ice age. So that could really foretell for some amazing revelations.
Yeah, and I think when people talk about the ice age, they sort of forget that the ice age hit its critical points at different places at different times because the glaciers receded. They just didn't all disappear overnight. They receded, which is why we have islands and mountain carvings and passes and some of the rivers. So when you hear flood myths, and they're not all necessarily within the same, century or even millennia, that's because they receded slowly, just like they advanced slowly. So while the flood myths may not be chronologically around the same time, that is perfectly consistent with how glaciers move and retreat. I think in some cases it's just a few inches a year. And I think anything more than that is considered, sort of catastrophic, or I guess if you're on the retreat side, maybe salvational. So, all right. So I know that your show is just not supposition, that you have evidence and that there's historical support for some of these things. So if you could sort of visit some of the hot topics or highlights, of what kind of evidence, and, you got a ton of guests on.
I'm writing an article for Ancient Origins magazine. It's called the Temples of Elephantine Island, which is in Aswan, Egypt, and it is, from all purposes, very, very old, older than the Old Kingdom, which is around 5,000 years old. What they found there, and I was there with a tour back in 2019. What they found there is two small temples cut from white granite, and they're laying on their side. The university, I think it's the German Institute of Archaeology, has been excavating there for about 10 years. And there was some massive explosion there because these two small temples are on their side. Each of them weighs approximately 3 tons. One of the temples has been blown to smithereens, and that's saying a lot by itself, because a 2.5 ton granite box, which is what this temple looks like, is so heavy that whatever the force was that dissolved it or blew it up must have been significant. So something blew it up. But the article gets into the details of how this temple was cut from a single block of granite. I have the forensic engineer Jim O'Con analyze the makeup of the temple, and he cannot discern the tools or how it was cut. It is so unique and so fresh. It looks like it was placed there yesterday. And what makes it fascinating is that it has a roof, it has 3 sides and a center opening, it has a stairway. It's a small temple. You can fit maybe 3 or 4 people on the entrance, but it is cut with a level of precision that is equal to what we have today, except that the stone is so hard that you couldn't use common saw blades to cut. And Jim O'Con's analysis, I haven't got the full analysis, but so far he's thinking that was some form of cutting torch that cut it, because the corners and the radiuses are so perfect that there's no way that a copper chisel and wood mallet could have cut it. So this is a technology that we run into when we start looking at the pyramid culture of Egypt. The Great Pyramid at Giza, the Bent Pyramid at Sawa, and the other small pyramids in northern Egypt are all cut with a level of precision that doesn't make sense to orthodoxy. The reason I'm writing the article is that there are so many questions that come about into the manufacturing techniques of this temple, of these temples. And the article is I'm almost done with it, but it is a real eye-opener on the science and technology from the science, how it was applied, and how old these temples are likely to be. Because Elephantine Island is mentioned in the Old Kingdom 5,000 years ago, but it looks like this place is at least 10, 15, perhaps 20,000 years old, which would make it mind-bogglingly old.
Yeah, I remember reading an article probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think it was related to your site. It was from somewhere else. And I might have posted anyway, that they had found fossil evidence in the stones along the base of the pyramids, indicating the fossil evidence that they may be 9,000 or 10,000 years old, and that there was so much of it, and the way it was embedded and around it. It's not like someone just got lucky and found and threw that kind of soil around that area. That it was more likely a natural occurrence back when these pyramids may have been underwater for some period of time, and it was consistent with that kind of finding. I'm not sure if my words are giving it justice, but it is.
No, you make a good point, because 10 years ago, Robert Schoch, along with John Anthony West, did an analysis of some of the outer portions of the Great Khufu pyramid, and there is saltwater residue about halfway up the pyramid, which means that it was covered in saltwater for some period of time. We don't know how long it was, but it really brings up a lot of questions. And there's also evidence on the interior chambers of the Great Pyramid. The Great Hall, the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber have residue of salt water that has been analyzed, and is from actual salt water. So how did it get in there is the big question that everyone asks.
That's for sure. And for anyone out there who's thinking, well, maybe the rocks they used as bricks were just found from underwater, just remember the last time you tried to pick up a rock from underwater. It's about 50 times harder than it is from, above ground. And those stones are pretty big, and moving them themselves is a fairly Herculean task, which is still speculated on exactly how it was all moved, and there's only theories. So if you think that they found thousands of rocks underwater and were able to successfully get them, either you have to agree with Cliff that there's enormous technologies with like really subterranean cranes that could do that, or these structures were actually underwater for some parts, so they're older than orthodoxy says. Which is the simpler explanation? It's that they were underwater for some period of time. The outside of the pyramids and how they were built is really, amazing as well. But I actually had the guest of the History of Africa on, and he made a point. Well, not when you see that they built smaller pyramids first and they had lots of failed pyramids beforehand, and that was impressive, and it is fairly persuasive. However, what most of us don't know about, and I didn't know about, or at least I did, and it never really made an impression, was just how intricate the interiors of the pyramids are. To me, building that kind of structure in those times with that kind of interior design and architecture with secret passages, and not just inside the pyramid itself, but underneath. There's subterranean chambers and subchambers, and almost like what's the word? Almost like plumbing, aqueducts, and things like that. It was like they were architects, engineers, and interior designers with an eye towards the extremely creative involved. And I don't know, it's mind-blowing, that it could be done without computers and advanced technology, and
what makes the Great Pyramid fascinating is that we get the information from archaeologists who are not scientists. When you look at it from an engineering point of view, and a greatest example of that would be Chris Dunn, who's a NASA engineer, and who builds the tools that are used in the spacecraft, and understands tight tolerances of metal and stuff. When he wrote his book, The Great Giza Power Plant, he went into these chambers. He went into the subterranean section underneath the Great Pyramid, and his analysis was that this is a giant machine. Because the tolerances are so close, why would you build that for a tomb? Why would you have tolerances that are, so tight that you can't pass air or water or fluids through? They have to basically retain fluids, And his analysis of the pyramid was that it was some kind of device, some kind of an energy-producing device. The chambers of the queen, the king's chamber, all have vents that perhaps had liquid. I mean, he believed that the queen's chamber was filled with liquid hydrogen because he did an analysis of the walls, and there's bits and particles of hydrogen molecules, and also in the king's chamber there's similar. There's water in there. So he believes, and has done written a number of books and articles, that the entire structure, this massive pyramidal structure, was used to generate huge amounts of energy. Now, we don't know how it was dispersed, but in the last 2 years, in fact, in 3 years, 2017, well, it's more than 3 years, a consortium of scientists, Japanese and French scientists, scanned the Great Pyramid and found a massive void in the upper third of the pyramid that cannot be explained. And they also discovered a lot of really tight tolerances in the stonework, which doesn't make sense if it's a tomb. Egyptologists have a real problem with science because it tends to throw a wrench in their belief that, the simplistic answers are the best. Tombs, copper tools and chisels are their way to go, and they just do not like the sophisticated technological answers to questions that they pose or ruins that they discuss. So,
yeah. And a couple things I want to say to the audience, and I think that they know this, but intuitively, but maybe it has to be said. Not everything that ends with ology is a science. It just means it's a study of. And there's a different, just because things end with ology or ologist doesn't make it a science. It just means that somebody studied something. And, you have astronomy and you have astrology. So, I think people know this intuitively, but when they hear ology or ologist, they think, well, he's saying it's not a scientist, but I heard ology, and that's science. It's not. It just means the study of, and I'm not saying that as a pejorative or as a compliment. I'm just stating as a matter of fact. One of the things I really enjoy about Cliff and your show is that you name names, you have the guests on. A lot of people who talk about the same kind of things that you talk about and are in what people would talk about, let's just call it alternative theory, alternative science. They're like me. They're hobbyists. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm a lazy intellectual. This is why I love podcasts. I can consume a ton of information without working too hard. I don't have to read anything. I don't have to watch a 2.5-hour movie on YouTube and then 6 others to get different opinions. I can just listen. But Cliff has the people who writes the book. So listeners, if you listen long enough, unfortunately, I've done a few solo shows, and I say unfortunately because I hate doing solo shows, but one of them I called it Book Reports, and I read Chariots of the Gods, and I did a report on that, and in that same show I read Avi Loeb's Extraterrestrial, and I did a little review of what he said. Well, I did that because Avi Loeb's publicist was kind enough to send me a copy of the book. Avi Loeb appeared on Cliff's show, so that's the difference. This is the difference between, Jay Leno or David Letterman getting the guest, and me, I get the book. So, but at least I got the book. By
the way, Avi Loeb's going to be back in the fall, Jeff, and he has an article and a new book. And I had his article posted. He has written an article on that the astrophysicists and the government should write peace treaties with aliens. And it blew me away. I was like, well, what? Do you know something we don't? Are we already involved speaking with aliens? Well, he wrote this amazing article about the reasons we should be writing peace agreements with alien civilizations.
Yeah, I saw that, and I read that article, and I think I posted it on Garden of Doom's Facebook page. We don't have a group, but we have a page. Yeah, and I'm very jealous that you not only have him once, but twice. But all right, maybe he'll send me the article, or his publicist will. But no, that's very cool. And for those who don't know, Avi Loeb is the head of a Harvard department on astrophysics. So this isn't just some guy from XYZ University in the middle of Mali or something. So anyway, not that there's anything wrong being at the University of Mali. It's just Harvard is Harvard. So yeah, that's incredible. I wonder if he knows other things. But he went from an extraterrestrial saying, this is likely dead extraterrestrial technology that made its way through our universe, but dormant, to we should be actively writing peace treaties. Listen, I think that
he actually found the Oumuamua asteroid, and what makes Dr. Avi Loeb unique is he's the only astrophysicist that took the analysis from a series of telescope arrays around the world, and with his team showed that it wasn't an asteroid, that it was a piece of space junk from another civilization. And what makes his analysis so amazing is that the space junk actually changed its trajectory as it entered our solar system. So it came out of our solar system from another planetary system, entered our solar system, passed through. All of our Earth's satellites were on automatic, and when it came by, we had like 20 telescopes scanning it. But we didn't even know it had come until 6-8 months after it left. And he analyzed all the data, and he showed it as to be a piece of space junk, but even more sophisticated, it's a solar sail. It has a sail attached to the body of a craft. So when you see the Oumuamua illustration that he proposed, it's really pretty cool.
Yeah, but be careful when you say that, because
it shows that we're not alone, man. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it changed directions, and he showed how it didn't change directions the way other things sometimes do, like comets, because there was no tail, there was no discharge of the changing directions a little bit is not that odd when it's impacted by gravity, but you see ice and stuff melt off of it and create a tail, which is, I guess, what causes, it's sort of like moving a rudder, and he showed that no, there was none of that. It's not possible. And also, like the reflections of sunlight off it showed almost an impossibly flat shape, almost like a pancake shape, which, if anyone's seen asteroids or planets, they're generally round or roundish. This was like almost like figure like a slice of bologna, like there was that kind of cut would be astronomical nth. But yeah, interesting book and interesting guy, and you should subscribe to his show and you'll hear the man speak himself about that. So that's amazing. I personally think we should be prepared for anything to the extent that we can, though I'm not sure that there's much that we can do about it if they come knocking. So,
well, that's the big thing, and I, as a conference director for years, had the who's who of UFO and alien interaction. Even some scientists that had Stanton Friedman, who passed away a couple of years ago, was a foremost ufologist. He was a regular at our show. But what made it really challenging for me is that 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we still had sightings. We still saw UFOs in the sky. Occasionally they landed and they reported that they had landed. But I'm at the point now where it's like, I'm tired of looking at them. Land on the planet, come out, say, hi, we're here. And by the way, we're from this planetary system, or we're from that planetary system. Because that's when all bets are off. That's when we begin to evolve as a species, because we go from, hey, we're the only ones in the universe. And, God created us, there's nobody else. Well, when it's another planetary system and their citizens come from planet X to say hello, Earthlings, then we know, and we can begin thinking about our evolution. How far advanced is this a civilization? What is their technology behind the crafts they have? It changes everything. And that's where I am right now. I'm really like, tell us, land and show us what you're all about. That's totally where I'm at.
Cliff is an optimist, so he is the garden. And you know what? I'm going to try to avoid being too doomy. So I'm not even going to go with the counter on that. I'm going to let that sit because I respect you so much, and I like this. I like this garden approach. I've been trying to be a little bit more gardeny this year than doomy. So let's talk about some interesting stuff that nobody can really argue about, at least some of the existence of. But we have learned without a shadow of a doubt that the Neanderthals were not big dummies. They were not like trolls. They had art. They had culture. This 100,000-year war between Homo sapiens sapiens and Neanderthals wasn't so much a war as an interbreeding, almost like assimilation type of thing. For a while, it was thought that they were the stronger ones, but we had the tools, so we beat them because we had better spears, or sort of like 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of scenario in slow motion. But the conventional thinking is that no, we just sort of absorbed them. Maybe we made more babies than they did, but we just sort of absorbed them into our culture. So what's your take, or what do you have to add about the Neanderthals? And then we're going to go into some of the other less known hominids, modern hominids that we're only really first scratching the surface of.
The Neanderthals are an interesting hominin for many reasons. First of all, they were built for survival. They're heavier bones. They're bigger than Homo sapiens sapiens. Their brain is bigger, which is interesting. It's like, how in the hell did we survive when our competitors, the Neanderthals, were physical specimens built for survival? That's always been a question. I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to, because I have a really Occam's razor theory on that. Because they were built for survival, and they were these big, tough people, and we were just prettier. That they wanted to make with us because we were gentle. Our women were more attractive, and our men were more attractive. They were gentler looking, just like how elves in Lord of the Rings look prettier now, look prettier than the men and the dwarves did in that movie, that maybe we look prettier and the Neanderthals wanted to get busy with us instead of each other. Well, I think that they have analyzed us, Homo sapiens sapiens, and we do have some genetic disposition of Neanderthal. So we picked up through interbreeding bits and pieces, perhaps that survival instinct, perhaps unknown capacities of our brain, or physiology, how we process food, how we excrete toxins. That could be all part of Neanderthal. We don't have the technology to know that yet. I think someday, we've plotted the genome of Homo sapiens sapien, but because there's no Neanderthals left, we can't plot their genomes. We don't know specifics, but my best guess is that we do have the best parts of the Neanderthals. We just don't know it.
They were pretty much only in Europe, right?
In Europe, but they've found them in China. They are also in parts of isolated parts of Southeast Asia.
So they migrated as well.
Yeah. There's also questions about the inception point. The out of Africa theory is now in question. There is evidence of very, very early hominins in China. There's very early, unusual hominins that are just being discovered in Australia. And these are very unusual. They have our brain size, except that they're smaller and they have thinner bone and much older. So they may have appeared, and this is a theory that a lot of scientists have now, is that the Earth had a different gravitational field and had lighter gravity, so these smaller hominins were able to exist. And then as the Earth changed its orbital field and got closer to the sun, the gravity shifted, and those hominins were not able to survive. This also goes to the Paracas people that have these extremely large craniums. And the theory now is that the Paracas people were not able to survive because the Earth's environment shifted to such a degree that they were not able to procreate.
Who are the Paracas people?
The Paracas people of Peru are this species that have 30% more brain matter than we do. They have very elongated skulls. And when they were discovered about 50 years ago, people were amazed because they all first thought it was head binding.
Right.
Which is a practice that a lot of sophisticated ancient cultures use to venerate their gods. But the Paracas people actually were born with these immense craniums, 20 to 30% more brain matter than we have. And they lived in an area of Paracas, Peru, and built very unusual pyramidal structures. They had a language, and they looked like they were into cosmology as well, studied the constellations and things like that. But they had the longest craniums on record, which means that they had the largest brains on record.
Was there any overlap between the Paracas people and Homo sapiens sapien in South America?
The big issue that I have is there's a couple of scientists, well, they're not scientists. There's a research investigator who's on Ancient Aliens or Not. His name is Brian Forrester, who's the foremost authority. He has not gotten permission to take a full skeletal remain of a Paracas person and have it correctly analyzed. What he has discovered is that they were taller than us. They had heavier bone mass, big jaws. They had an extra rib. And they may have had a different interior organ setup than we did. They had maybe perhaps different organs. It makes a lot of people believe that they could have been an alien race that came to Earth and was kind of like marooned or something because they're so out of place. And that's why you don't hear a lot about them. But they're fascinating. They're massively, their craniums are massive. And we have a couple of regular guests that are artists, and one of them, her name is Marcy McCanna, has reproduced a complete head of what these people look like, and they are really quite fascinating. So,
well, it sounds almost like the description of the alien from Alien without the exoskeleton. So,
well, yeah, without opening the mouth and another, killing people,
Well, maybe. No, probably not. But the extra organ. I love all things weird, including like vampires. So the extra organ and how they deal with blood and whatever. But I was just asking about the overlap, or if it's even close time-wise, which obviously we don't know the answer to yet. But I'm wondering, is that the origin of those gods? Is that where they got the idea of those gods from? These bigger, stronger, smarter beings that existed either close enough behind them that they found their remains, or existed alongside them for a while and then disappeared or whatever. But that's a fun topic for another day, I suppose.
If you study the Hindu Vedas, they talk about Earth's cyclic system. This is why I'm more focused on ancient Hindu history than I am with current history, because they talk about the cyclic nature of Earth. And if you read the Vedas, they talk about civilizations that appeared and then disappeared. And it's hinted that with every cycle of humanoid that appears on Earth, the Earth's a different kind of Earth, which translates to different gravity, different environment to grow food, different living conditions, being air and water and the soil and things like that. So each cycle, these ancient cycles, and we're talking hundreds of millions of years, produce different types of hominins. And so when we look at the Paracas people, that's probably what happened to them. They arrived, or they were developed thousands and thousands of years ago in a separate track from Homo sapiens sapien, and were not able to survive because of environmental conditions.
Yeah, the Veda is definitely on my list of to try to find experts in that area. Because, again, being the lazy intellectual, I want to find someone who can tell me about it rather than to explore it myself. The other people who, it's not even controversial that they exist anymore, but the Denisovans.
Yeah, that's a big one in our show. We have some of the experts on there. A guy named Andrew Collins has written extensively about the Denisovans, and it's very much guesswork. They have, what do we have right now? We have a molar, we have a pinky finger, we have part of a jaw, and what makes it unique is we have some of their jewelry, all found in Siberia in the last 7 to 8 years. And Andrew Collins believes that they were at minimum 8 feet tall, 300 plus pounds, highly intellectual, probably came from a whole society that was destroyed in the Great Flood, the Great Deluge. His belief is that they were the ones who created and ran Göbekli Tepe as an educational learning center. He believes that Göbekli Tepe was what you would call a reboot center. And there are a number of these centers in different parts of the world where the survivors of Earth's deluge came to be re-educated on agriculture, basic civil development, law-giving, and animal husbandry. All the keys to civilization were taught at Göbekli Tepe. And there's other places, perhaps in China, Central South America, that we don't know about. I know for a fact as a Mayanist that the Maya developed in 2 phases. There's the pre-Maya, who built the biggest pyramids. We have El Mirador. The pyramids at El Mirador are as big as the pyramids at Giza in Egypt. They're massive, massive, very sophisticated. And those people were so sophisticated, we don't know, we haven't deciphered their language. Post pre-Maya, we do have their language. But I think that the Maya survived the deluge and were able to reboot their civilization. But they lost all that pyramid technology, which is significant because I have my mentor, who was a Mayan elder, said in the heyday there were over 52,000 pyramids from the Yucatan to Honduras. 52 active pyramid communities. Wow. 52,000. So, and what we have left that are still working is about 5,000. So we've got to get on the ball and figure out how those things work. But yeah, so I kind of diverge there. So yeah, the survival and of the civilizations and what kind of humanoid was left is anyone's guess. Is what, you know. So the Denisovans probably went the way of some of those early hominins that we find bones for. But I'm waiting for us to find a full skeletal remains so we really get a sense of them.
Yeah, for sure. But for now, we can do some rank fun speculation, which is really more my area than yours. But I mean, to me, that description sounds a lot like the giants, the heroes of renown that are described in Genesis, the Anunnaki, I mean, a lot of things can come from that. But also, even in the Atlantis myth, I think part that I only learned recently, and I hope it's correct, so I hope I learned it rather than just heard it, is that the Atlanteans went to war with a culture in the East and lost. Well, that could be I'm saying it wrong, the Beneficence, their culture. Maybe maybe it was a similar people, similar stature.
Could have been survivors. Now that's one of the big stories on pre-dynastic Egypt, is that the survivors of Atlantis came and settled in Egypt and brought their technology, and this is the technology that we see at the Osirian. We see it at the Great Pyramids. We see it at the various temples that are constructed from megalithic stone. Now, when you go to some of these places, like I mentioned earlier, the Hathor Temple in Dendera, it is composed of slabs of granite, average weight of 2.8 tons. How they lifted those up 50, 60 feet in the air to create a roof is anyone's guess. But if you take a compass, a regular navigational compass, and place it on the floor of the Hathor Temple, the Isis Temple, the Best Temple at Dendera, that sucker starts spinning.
Oh, wow.
Which means that it's on a major energy field. The other thing that makes it, and it's never brought up, and this is why it really is a challenge for me to hear from Egyptologists, is that the slabs that make up the entire floor of most of the temples are pieced together with what they call keys, which are pieces of unknown metal that are clamped to the slabs so they don't move. And you only see those in very, very ancient places in Peru, China, and Mexico. And they're in these temples in Egypt. Those clamps mean that those temples are at least 10,000 years or earlier. My guess is in the, tens of thousands. My tour guide believes that Hathor Temple is 200,000 years old. Now, I don't use that kind of language on my podcast because I have a lot of college, anthropologists and people that would flip out. But I let my guests bring it up, and I will quietly nod when I hear those kind of things.
So that's a shocking, enormous number, but it's not different than the Sumerian and Egyptian list of their kings, and of course their kings, had ridiculous long lifespans compared to ours, even by the beget and begatting section in the Bible, but similar. I mean, we see sort of some of the same things, but it just bugs me that everyone knows Atlantis. That part doesn't bug me, and everyone says it fell into the sea, it sunk into the sea. Nobody spends any time on who they lost the war to. I mean, why is that not interesting? I mean, is it because the Atlantis was supposed to be close to Europe, while the people they lost the war were in Asia, and the last 3,000 years of history has been mostly Eurocentric? Or is it just that somebody made this up one day and there's nothing to it? I don't know. I think
whenever you talk about Atlantis, the orthodoxy is going to cringe, and in some cases, if you're sitting in someone's office, you may be asked to leave. So whenever you bring up a culture under that banner, you're automatically relegated to Crazyville. So
I'm talking about even in the halls of Crazyville, people aren't talking about who beat Atlantis in a war enough. I want to go to Crazyville, and I want to talk to those folks about. Well, actually, I want them to come to me, but that's lazy.
You need to get her name's Laura Little, Greg Little's wife, Dr. Greg Little. She took
not the tight end for your team, San Francisco, Greg Little.
Oh, no. This is Dr. Greg Little, which, by the way, I have been lucky to get him in July. He took, he was funded by ARE, which is Edgar Cayce's institute in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And if you don't know who Edgar Cayce was, he's one of the great psychics at the turn of the century, 1920s to, I think he died in 1945. But he was able, through psychic vision, to see individuals' lives in Atlantis. And he collected and wrote a number of books. And one book has specifics on Atlantis and the various satellites. Now, Atlantis was in the Atlantic, a huge continent, but it had satellites in different parts of Africa, Central and South America. And Dr. Little and his wife Laura used that data, dove in the Bimini Islands, dove off the coast of Mexico, and discovered ruins of marble buildings. We're going to have him on the show in July. But he talks about the different technologies that were used, and that could also at some point lead into, and I don't talk about war, but you know, if they use these weapons on people, it would be a devastating loss. You know, it'd be like lasers against bullets, you know. So, and this is why it's really important to study the Mahabharata texts of India, because they talk about the great war of Earth against the different cultures. And if you're into Atlantis, they probably have an aspect of those people fighting with the Indians, the Indian people that are against off-world types that are trying to take over Earth. The Mahabharata talks about ET wars, which is kind of cool.
Oh, it's very cool. Yeah, and I'm sort of supposing that maybe those ETs were the same ones who defeated the Atlanteans. Who knows? I don't know. Again, this is blank speculation. Not good for your show. Perfect for my show. But I will try to make touch with this Laura Little, and maybe she'll grace me. Okay, back to hard stuff. I mean, as in tangible. The Hobbit people. They've discovered that there's definitely evidence of smaller statured people. I think this was in the Philippines or Malaysia, maybe both.
Malaysia.
Yeah. What can you tell us about them?
I had a anthropologist on, and it's really curious. It looks like there was a lab of some kind that was creating a lot of different hominins, and the hobbits were just one. They're a very short-lived race that only lived, I don't know, 10 or 20,000 years or something, and then they disappeared. But I mentioned it earlier that it's not just the Hobbit people, but these strange humanoids with very thin bones were developed in a similar area where the Hobbits were found. I'm not an expert on these Hobbit types, but Dr. Susan Martinez, who I had on the show, wrote a book called The Little People of Earth. And she believed that it is possible that the hobbits were a genetic type of small human that was developed and didn't pass the muster, couldn't survive the environment. But there are other small human races that were part of Lemuria, which is in the Pacific. And we're talking 20, 30, 40, 100,000 years ago. In the Mayan culture, the little people were extremely bright, and you can see examples of the little people at Tulum, which is on the Caribbean coast of Mexico in Yucatan. And their temples are, to get into one of the temples, you can't be any taller than 3 feet tall. But it's very cool to see, and it really makes sense. I thought when I first went to Tulum 20 years ago that it was like a sanctuary for prayer. And when I had her on my program, it's like, no, they were actual temples and dwellings to live in. Well, who in the hell, you had to crawl to get inside of one of these things. But the hobbits were, I believe, an experiment. And a lot of others talk about them too. Now, the scientific community chalks them up to another hominin on the branch of human evolution. So,
well, there's dozens of pygmy ethnicities that live right now that are small. I don't know if they're that small, but
yeah.
What do you, and it's okay if you don't know it. I know you're not an anthropologist, but what is the scientific name for the Hobbit people?
Oh, I have it somewhere. I don't know.
Okay. If it comes to you or you find it, that's fine. If not, it's all right too. My next one we already talked about, which was the elongated skull people. Now, I had thought that I read that there was possibly evidence of yet a new new hominin found sort of around the same place the Nisphasins were found. Why I can't say that now, I don't know. But almost like People X. And, you know, while if it's on the top of your head or I'm fabricating it, I also recently saw an article where they found evidence of a new upright being. I'm not going to say a hominin, though it was sort of advertised as such, maybe in Bulgaria or Albania, sort of around like Thrace, that part of southeastern Europe, almost with, they call it almost ape-like, but they almost had like it was almost like a reptilian or dinosaur-like print, like three bigger toes. And I posted it, and I said, listen, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if this is completely fabricated. I don't know if this is just some Aryan, myth that people originated in Europe, and this is faux evidence, but read the article and judge for yourself. But do you know anything about that, or has it not even crossed, your eyesight yet?
Before I answer that, the scientific name for hobbit is Homo florensis.
Right. That's right.
And that it's a real interesting topic because it's a fairly sophisticated humanoid, but it's just tiny human. It would be a small 2 or 3 year old Homo sapiens sapiens. So, a new species in Europe. I don't know about it. They are constantly finding skeletal evidence in caves in Siberia. So there seems to be a humanoid factory there also, and these different species are being uncovered. Again, we look at the Denificin. What do we have? We don't have a full skeleton. We don't even have a skull. We have fragments, and so the speculation has to really be dialed down, and a lot of people are concerned that we're jumping the gun until we really get a sense of the level of sophistication, of these people.
I'm definitely jumping the gun.
Well, no, I have a lot of people on the show that write fairly extensively about them based on very, very limited fact. They'll go by mythology, describing what they believe was this human.
By the way, I'm very glad when you reject that and you push back on me, because I think it only increases your credibility as a guest. And I think people should respect it. I respect it. I'm just playing, but my show is, it is part factual, but it's also part informational, part entertainment. And so that's what I want to say. When I am jumping the gun, I realize I'm jumping the gun. I'm doing it purposely because that's the fun. That's where you write the comic book. That's where you have Ego the Celestial in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 basically stealing the Anunnaki myth, which by the way, I've heard the Anunnaki myth from Sumeria, but also in South Africa, which is geographically pretty close to Lemuria and South America and Southeast Asia, where you have, and it's funny that you said the term labs, and that's basically what people say the Anunnaki were doing. They were tinkering, making the people to mine gold or be their slaves or whatever, which I guess ended up being us. But it's not that different from the architects from the movie Alien, that mythology line, or any number of any other things that don't call panspermia, an accident. So, and
that's a whole can of worms right there, is panspermia. I mean, I had Dr. Wick Ramsey, who actually formulated the term, on my show. He believes that the pandemic was caused from panspermia. He even wrote a book on it. He also believes that panspermia, which for those of you who don't know what that means, it's intelligently guided microbes from space that bombard the Earth, and on those microbes are little signatures of information, cellular signatures, that either touch us and we are evolved from that information, or land in the ground and we eat the vegetables that come from the soil that has this data in it. And the theory behind panspermia also is that Earth is a lab, a complete lab, and some ancient or extremely old ET civilization is guiding our evolution.
Or a not so benevolent God. it
could go there.
It works either way. That's. But again, I'm ranked speculation. Cliff is not. So I'm gonna. He's gonna.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I have fun with it too. I just can't settle for speculation. I got to have somebody on the show who's written a book or has been on TV who is supporting the insanity of the speculation. But it doesn't have to be insanity, because a lot of times it's too far advanced. We're not ready for it. And a few years down the line, all of a sudden they find evidence for the speculation. So it becomes hypothetical or theoretical. That's what I like to say.
Ooh, I like that. It makes me sound less Jumpy the Sharky. But yeah, that's what Arthur Clarke said. Magic is just science that hasn't been developed yet. Something like that, anyway.
Yeah.
So all right, so we're not sure about Bulgaria or Thrace or whatever. So we're gonna leave that alone, because that I only saw that once, and that's the kind of thing that you see in more than one source. Even if it is a little bit Jumpy the Shark, you still see that in more than one source. So we're gonna set that aside. So I'm going to go a little bit out of my order, because Atlantis lately has been tied to the Eye of Mauritania. What are your thoughts on the Eye of Mauritania? Or the Rehat structure, I believe they call it.
Honestly, I haven't even heard I don't even know what that is. You got one on me.
Oh, it's really cool. Google it, and maybe you'll have someone that wrote a book about it. But it basically is a giant nebula just on the west of the Atlas Mountains, not in Mauritania, though. It's in Morocco. So I don't know why it's called the Eye of Mauritania, other than maybe the whole land was called Mauritania at some point, because it's obviously a Greek word. And the thing about it is it looks a lot like how we design our quarries these days, except that it's like 25 miles or 25 kilometers in diameter. Whichever it is, it's an enormous hole. And scientists say that it was caused by like a meteorite or an asteroid impact with the Earth, but it's so symmetrical that some people are saying that that's where Atlantis was, or that is, that was a closed portal to, the inner Earth. But whatever, it's everything to anyone who wants it to be whatever they want it to be. But it's a cool visual. And
let me stop you real quickly. This is the one that's on the Atlantic coast of Africa, right?
It's close. I don't know if it's on the coast or not, but it's darn close, and it is outside of the Pillars of Hercules, or at least the theory says that it would have been then.
I think that there was speculation that it could have been Atlantis, but if the details are that when Plato describes Atlantis with these cylindrical ports, that the size that this place that you're talking about in Africa couldn't measure up. It's too small.
Yeah, and also the design doesn't seem like it would have been inland. It seems more like the design of like Carthage. When you see the Carthage rebuilt, it looks a lot like that, which is also maybe not a coincidence. All right, you mentioned Lemuria. I have touched on Lemuria a couple times in this show. I had a friend of mine who's actually a listener also say, he said, you had me at Lemuria. So tell us about Lemuria, because I'm sure you do it a lot more justice than I could.
Lemuria is a continent that was in the Pacific. The current dates of its existence are several million years to its destruction, approximately 20 to 28,000 years ago. It developed the earliest humanoids, which we don't know if it became Homo sapien or not, because the entire continent was destroyed. It may have been part of Africa. This is why Africa has so many strange hominins in it. But Lemuria, which also went as the term Mu, M-U, produced a civilization that eventually migrated approximately 20 to 28,000 years ago to Central America. And the Maya, part of the Maya culture, and by the way, the Maya culture was multiracial, multi-ethnic, and was made up of a number of different racial types, similar to the United States. This is why when you look at their sculptures and their reliefs and their artwork, you don't just see one type of racial type. You see African-centric, Asian-centric, a couple of types of humans that are probably not around anymore, including long heads, people with very long craniums. And then you see these other types that we believe, or a lot of scholars believe, came from Mu, which is Lemuria. So when they came over, they brought with their technology, and this is important to realize because many of the Maya pyramids are very, very sophisticated. We only look at them from the outside, but about 10 years ago, NASA began scanning pyramids in the Yucatan, including Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Koba, and they found that these pyramids had inner chambers that had unusual, what looked like technology at one time, or what is considered housing. Housing is the support for technology. You plug something into it. So there was housings inside these temples. And my mentor talks about the science and the humanity that the Lemurians brought to the Yucatan and the Maya. But also, there's a lot of thought that the migration from Lemuria also was part of the eventual Atlantis. So, this is the thing that I always tell people that isn't really thought about. You know, look how far we've come in 200 years on Earth. We're considered pretty sophisticated. Think about a culture that has 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 years of research. What kind of technology are they going to develop? It's going to be mind-blowing. It's going to be like fantasy land. And so this is what I think a lot of technology derivatives came to the Maya, perhaps ancient Atlantean, and other parts of the Earth. So, but that's a long, long time ago, thousands of years ago. And so we're lucky to find any technology. Now, we find it in the pyramids, which is a big structure. But if you look at the Antikytherian mechanism that was found off of the Mediterranean, that is do you know about the Antikytherian mechanism?
I believe
it's the gearbox.
Right, it's almost like a watch gearbox that they found that was very.
Yeah. They reversed engineered that, and it looks like the technology had been around at least a few hundred years. Well, there's no way in hell that the Greeks developed it, and the Greeks came before the Romans. So it's one of those technologies that's inherited. That's a pretty sophisticated piece of technology, and for you guys that don't know what the Antikytherian mechanism is, it is a piece of technology in a copper box that they use to navigate the oceans. It could give them latitudes, it can give them bearings as to where they are based on the stars and the cosmology that they were interpreting using this mechanism. So that's one of those pieces of technology that's handed down from a very, very early civilization. Antikytherian mechanism it's called. And we'll look it up and you can see it. They just scanned it again about 2 years ago, and they found sub-gearing that meant that they probably had to manufacture it, like pour metal in a mold so that they get the tolerances to have gears working among each other. And I think they tentatively dated that thing to about 4,000 years.
And when did we discover it, meaning modern people?
It was discovered in 1960, I think the 1960s.
Okay. The way I think about it, because it's hard to envision, I don't know if you or listeners watched Lovecraft Country, and I'm not really suggesting that they do because I found it to be a giant disappointment after episode 1. But one of the characters found a box, and it was sort of the same thing. It was like a gearbox, and of course, when she unlocked the key, she could sort of navigate space and time by it. But it looked to me, that's how I picture it, which may be entirely wrong. But anyway, we're going to bridge the gap from taking you from sticking with hard reality, and I'm going to bridge you into sort of the softer world, and then I'm gonna ask you for some rank speculation. So I'm warning you in advance of this. But I know that you, or at least you seem to be a very spiritual person. You definitely, I believe that you've talked about some of your journeys and shamanistic rituals and the Ascadic, I hope I'm pronouncing that, record. And can you talk to people sort of about what is the Ascadic record?
Yeah. The Akashic records have been known for centuries by ancient cultures. The Tibetans knew about it, the early Chinese. It is a database of everything that has happened before, during, and in the future of Earth. And when I say it's like a cloud computing database because it's etheric. You can't see it. It's on some level of reality. Like we're physical reality. When we meditate and we go to sleep, we enter a different level of reality. The Akashic records are in a level of reality that allows us consciously to connect using certain techniques, but the average person can't really access it because you have to be in an altered state. Now, and not an altered state like you're high on drugs. It's a shift in consciousness. Some people believe that the great inventors and scientists and music composers like Mozart tapped into the Akashic records and had downloads. But I'm so fascinated by it that I've signed up some of the top people who are Akashic experts on my show this summer. That's kind of like a couple of the shows on Akashic records. It's important because the ancients knew about it and had a way to tap into it, and I think that it helps us evolve. And what that means is, as a doctor or somebody who's developing health medicines or whatever, can utilize the Akashic records to develop medicines for longevity, medicines to cure cancer, medicines to help with birth defects, things like that. But it's all a time factor. Now, as an example, if we look at Tesla developed a wireless electrical system that was so sophisticated he would have put all the power companies out of business. Wardenclyffe Tower, which he built in upstate New York, was an example of free energy. He got it going. It uses telluric energy. It's based on, I did a talk on this a couple of months ago. I think he tapped into the Mayan temples and somehow, and perhaps the Akashic field, and downloaded the data on how to build this thing. He actually did it. It wasn't a idea. He actually built it. He didn't get it to go because he had to have multiple towers to make it work, right? But that tower, and he said it to himself before he died, it was too far in advance for itself. It was probably a few hundred, if not more, years in advance of that time period. Remember, Tesla was born in the 1890s, died 1942, I think, or maybe a little earlier. And brilliant genius, just out of control and brilliant, you know. And the thing that makes him so unique is that he's using natural energy. He's not polluting the earth, which when we generate power now, it's nuclear power. That's horribly toxic, you know. So, but Tesla is one of the best examples of tapping into the Akashic field, the Akashic records. I mentioned spiritualists like Madame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner. I'm trying to think of some others who regularly developed or were taught how to access the Akashic records. Now, the Akashic records, remember, are everything before, in the past, current, and in the future. I just finished interviewing a doctor who wrote a book on the afterlife, or what happens when we die. In his book, which just came out, by the way, I'll give you the name of it in a second.
Sure.
He talks about when we die, that we are constantly learning, and we go to these classes, and the fundamental focus, the fundamental tool that is used in educating is the Akashic records. So we don't use it as a physical being right now because nobody really knows how to access it. A few people do, and I'm kind of curious as to why we don't know more. I'm thinking out loud. It's possibly because there could be negative repercussions if you tap in and all of a sudden you create a machine that burns places down or something. I don't know. But isn't it interesting that this doctor finds that as a spirit, a deceased being on the other side after death, the teaching tool is the Akashic records. So that's a little highlight. That's about.
Well, that's
I could do a whole show on it.
Well, I'm sure you will. Yeah, and I think I got you to cross the bridge into speculation, because we could go into druids, oracles, spiritualists, mediums, shamans. You know, all might be people who are able to tap into the Akashic record, as well as scientists and artists and whatnot. And of course, for you comic book fans, hey, maybe that was the difference between Jean Grey and Phoenix, that she got too much. So I actually think that comic books are full of all of these kinds of things that people just look where they want to look. I already talked about Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I said Ego, but they pronounce it, I think, Ego in that. But the movie The Eternals that's coming out, That's the Book of Enoch. They just turned 200 angels into 7 superhero-like beings.
I totally believe that science fiction, these writers who write science fiction, and there's so many great books over the years, are totally tapping into the Akashic Records, because I think it's in many cases like Dune. The new movie Dune's coming out soon, which I can't wait.
Right.
I think that planet is, the writer is able to grasp, in what we call science fiction is actually an aspect of reality. So, and it could be tapping into this Akashic Records before, during, or now in the ancient future. Who knows?
Well, Dune and Foundation to me are like Game of Thrones before there was Game of Thrones, where they had complete world building, complete cultures, to mirror our own world, where there's tons of cultures and religions and differing opinions, as opposed to, Star Trek, where it's like all the Klingons are Klingons and all the Vulcans are Vulcans, and they're pretty much all alike. Now, I know that they've tried to get away with that, away from that as time has gone by, but we always have aliens as sort of being homogeneous while we're heterogeneous, and no, not so much in Foundation and Dune and those types of things. Anyway, so I'm successfully taking you into the world of rank speculation. So feel free where you feel comfortable to join in the world of fun fiction. So I have heard that the Kaaba of Mecca possibly is extraterrestrial, possibly a meteor or an asteroid. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we did a show on that a few years ago. I'm trying to think of the author. He's an Arab who has written about the various deities from Muhammad himself to some of the early classical figures. It's a sacred rock, and we're not Arab, so we will not be allowed into the sacred chambers of that place. But you can actually see part of it. Part of it is exposed, this rock. I'm trying to think what he said about it. He believed that it was much bigger when it originally was discovered, that it is a meteorite, but it's more than just that. It actually appears, in his estimation, to be imbued with something, and the radiation that is coming out of it shifts your consciousness. Now, when you watch, have you ever seen a ceremony when there's hundreds of people in the building walking in a huge circle?
Yeah.
Apparently, when you're moving like that in a circle, you automatically are shifted in consciousness. So you're kind of in an altered state. And the stone that is in the center, this meteorite or sacred stone, is also imbuing you in that chamber. So you're getting a self-imposed altered state by walking in a circle, and then you're being bathed in energy by this stone. And all kinds of weird stuff can happen, from people who are shamans bilocating, leaving their body and then consciously being in a different place, to being given certain attributes, physical attributes, being able to prophesize about the future, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of cool.
One slight correction. I don't think that it's limited to Arabs. I think you must be Islamic. You must be of the faith.
I think you have to. You can't. A Westerner is not allowed. Let's just say that.
You might be right about that. I don't know. So anyway, we'll move off of that because neither one of us is sure about that. All right. So rank speculation. What do you think the Anunnaki were?
I'm going to brag here just for a little bit.
You're
wrong. I typically don't brag. I knew Zecharia Sitchin personally, and of course he was the. Oh, you got it. Good for you. He was the author, researcher, and linguistic scientist that basically took the Sumerian texts and discovered this whole Anunnaki story. I have issue with the whole Anunnaki story simply because it seems so fantastic until you talk to people like Michael Tellinger, who actually lives in South Africa, who has actually written about the great gold tunnels that are so deep they have no idea how. I mean, they're miles deep. And also these strange human being skeletal remains that we find in Africa in these labs, these strange labs. So, yeah, I think they existed. Now, remember, if you read Sitchin, we're talking 400,000 years ago. 400. I mean, right there, you shut the door on orthodoxy. You shut the door on most scientists.
Oh, no, we left orthodoxy on the other side of the bridge.
I'm just saying that. I mean, this is why when you mention, the Anunnaki. Now, remember, the Anunnaki are the fallen angels.
Yeah, they get us here to orthodoxy. They're away. We have a fourth. Let's see.
Well, it's hard for me to go too far off the cliff, but I'll take it as far as I can. I mean, it gets into alternative science, and I can speak pretty freely on that because I am a Mayanist, and the Maya are the least understood ancient civilization on the planet, and the interpretations we're given of the Maya is so off the wall, it's ridiculous. Anthropologists have them wearing loincloths, cutting each other up, doing blood sports, and being pretty uncivilized, and yet living in cities that were purposefully aligned to constellations.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do that unless you have a level of science that is off the chart. And we know this now because they did scans of Tikal in Guatemala, and the main civic center at Tikal lines up exactly with the constellation of Neptune. Building for building, planet for planet, it lines up. What we know now, and we're beginning to understand, is that when you plug in to a constellation like that, you're picking up subtle energy. So each temple, each planet aligns perfectly. So the Anunnaki likely had similar technology where they understood subtle energy between planets, So when you asked me about the Anunnaki, yeah, I kind of like it. I think Sitchin took it to the extreme and wrote like 4 books on it. He even went to Mesoamerica and believes that the Olmec were kind of aligned with the Anunnaki. So, and that's the thing about being a wildcat like him. You can actually justify your theories by, claiming that known civilizations worked with the Anunnaki. So, so there you go.
Yeah, actually, I spoke to Michael Tellinger, and he's invited on the show, and he said that he's sort of taking a break, of that he's sort of been a little bombarded. So if you know him and can give him a friendly nudge and say, hey, the Garden of Doom, fun place to be, it's cool, I would be more eternally grateful. So I have a feeling that I'm going to get the same type of answer, but I'm still going to answer you anyway. Ask you, who do you think the Nephilim were, if anything? Well, Nephilim, as I've been told, is the...
Oh, Nephilim?
Yeah.
Well, I think they're the same.
That's a fair answer.
I think there's just different interpretations, Okay. I mean, Sitchin, when he died, there were a number of linguists that said, "Oh, you misinterpreted these cuneiforms, which are these stone tablets that the Sumerians wrote on, and they weren't giants, they weren't these aliens who came to Earth to mine gold to save their planet." So, yeah, but we're in a major shift in historical knowledge, because I think we're getting to the point now where the revelations are going to be so indisputable that the orthodoxy is going to have to shift. Now, I've had a number of scientists, most notably Dr. Kara Cooney, who flat out said on my show, which blew me away and got her in trouble. She said that Egyptology is dead.
Okay.
And this is a tenured college professor at UCLA, University of Southern California, or USC. So the shifts are happening now when you have tenured professors saying, you're crazy. And it's gotten so bad that in Egypt, they do not allow, unless you pay millions of dollars, ground penetrating radar to be used at any of their temples. Well, we know why, because they can't explain the tunnel system that's underneath the Giza Plateau, the tunnel systems that's under Dendera, the tunnel system that's under every major temple complex along the Nile. That's, an old kingdom. So, yep. And those tunnel systems were used to transport huge quantities of water, conducting. It's a great conductor. And they passed them underneath these temples to really juice these temples. So when they were active and you had a disease process going on, cancer, arthritis, whatever we have today, and you walked in certain parts of the temple, it was blasted in your body. You were blasted. This is also fascinating to consider. If you read the Bible and some of these older texts, people lived, according to the Bible, hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. Enoch, I'm trying to think of some of the biblical characters. They lived 800, 1,000 years.
Noah was supposed to have lived 800, 1,000 years. So I think a lot of these temples were, and I'm told, were actually healing apparatuses. So there you go. So, okay, so the Anunnaki and the Nephilim, probably the same. So I have a feeling that we're going to get similar answer for all, but who knows? The people from that were in the Vanilla, so they called the Veda, or what were they called?
Vamanas are in the Vamanas are a technology that you can read about in the Mahabharata text, which is the great war for Earth.
But those people that were manning those ships, if we presume them to be, well, we don't have to presume them to be accurate. What do you think those folks were? Those people?
They were Indians. They were India, but at a time frame equal to what we would consider the last phases of Atlantis, 20,000 to 12,000 years ago. The Vamanas were flying craft developed using a propellant, which is liquid crystal or liquid mercury and
quicksilver.
Yeah, they the Army, American U.S. Army, was purported to have found a Vamana in an Afghani cave about a decade ago, and the story came out that a number of local dignitaries, in fact, the president of Egypt, our Secretary of State at the time, others were told, were invited to go and see this craft. And what apparently the story goes that it was still running, and there was some kind of an energy force field around it. And when some of the guards got too close, they were immediately killed, dissolved, vaporized.
Like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
But the funny thing about it is when this story comes out, they describe it with great detail, which is kind of curious. And then all of a sudden, you didn't hear about it anymore. And the latest rumor is that it's an Area 51 being studied with some other ET craft that they're trying to reverse engineer.
Love it. All right, the Giants. Who do you think the Giants were, if at all?
Let's see. Well, if you read from Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman's book World of Giants, or some of the other people, it's a race of humanoids that were on the Earth up until probably. I mean, there's scattering stories of the mid 1800s of giants being found in secluded areas of the Appalachian Mountains. But I think they existed. There's extreme amounts of data in the form of newspaper articles of bones of giants as tall as 12 feet in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new book coming out next month by Hugh Newman and Jim Vieira on European giants that were monsters, some as tall as 20 feet, weighing 1,000 pounds. I can't imagine a person 20 feet tall. So yeah, there were an offshoot of humanoids. Why we don't see them today, I think it's back to environmental conditions. They can't survive in our current environment, which is the gravity. I think it's too hard for them. There's on record, if you do a search, there's a couple of stories of somewhat modern humans that lived at the turn of the century. One guy, I can't think of a name of him, he was a circus freak. I think he was like 16 feet tall.
Wow.
But he had chronic bone malformations, and I think just the environment didn't support him, and he died in his late 20s. So
here's where I impeach myself. I've actually done quite a bit of reading and digging because the Nephilim, in my infancy of searching, I thought they were one and the same, but I'm convinced that they are not at this point. Anyway, that's excellent. Now, I'm sure that you know what my last two categories are, and they're basically, if it's to be believed, it's sort of one and the same, just the flip side of the coin, so I'll name them together. What do you think angels and demons are? Nothing controversial here.
I think that angels are a tough one because there's so many different interpretations. I think with early civilizations, when they mentioned an angel, it was probably one of multiple levels. It was probably extraterrestrial, humanoid, that had a technology where they could pass through the current field of reality from some other place and communicate. Now that I've had an interview or two with people who talk about the afterlife, there are angelic beings there that are extremely advanced human entities that have lived very, very long periods of time that may be able to cross over into our dimension and communicate with people. But if you notice, they don't stay too long. I think it's too hard for them to maintain their vibrational rate in our reality. When you hear about afterlife, it's a whole different frequency. It's vibrating at a different frequency. So the physics in each reality are different. And that's why when you leave your body and you enter the afterlife, it's a different frequency, a different spin. So I think angels come from there. I think they're misinterpreted as probably ETs. And there is the fairy realm. And until recently, I didn't know that fairies can actually be as big as humans. And they're able to manipulate reality, and they can cross over. And if somebody is talking to you who looks like a fairy, you might think of him as an angel. So I think the interpretation isn't singular, angel. I think there's angels from different realities. I think the same thing goes for devil types, negative types. I can't really speak to evil types of entities because I haven't really studied it and I don't find it that amusing. What I can talk about are ETs that have had interactions with humans that are malevolent. You know, they're negative. They want to hurt people. In some cases, you can be killed by them. And so that's what I have to say about that topic.
That's fine. Okay. Well, fair enough on the rank speculation and taking you to places you absolutely can't go on your show without at least an author or someone who's there to support their research on it. So you've been super generous with your time. We're approaching 2 hours. So I want to just take this time, A, to thank you, B, thank you for being my guest on my 50th numbered show anyway, and to allow you to plug and promote anything that you want to plug and promote, whether it's your own stuff or things you're associated with. This is free commercial time for you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Jeff, and I want to congratulate you on your 50th podcast. Rock the world with it. I'm a huge advocate for podcasts, and I hope you can continue your work. And you look like you enjoy it, which is huge, because I run into certain people that are challenged by the whole process of talking to people and then going through, and what people that are listening, you have to understand that it's just not the recording. You have to edit it, you have to format it, and then upload it into a system. And so it takes time. And so I congratulate you on your 50th, because I know a lot of people that quit after like 10. So again, congratulations. And Garden of
Doom.
Garden of Boom.
Doom.
Excuse me. Garden of Doom. Great name and much success. So anyhow, if you want to check out Earth Ancients, I would appreciate it. It's earthancients.com. We just launched a brand new arm of on the Earth Ancients network. It's called Destiny. And Destiny covers the future. It's all about humanity, 100, 500, 1,000 years in the future, and what we look like as an evolved being. And we get into subtle energy work and also talk about the UFO question. And it's on the Earth Ancients Network. All you got to do is go to earthancients.com, and you can read or you can hear all about it. I urge you to check out Facebook, Earth Ancients Facebook, because we have galleries from each of our contributors. We require them to supply photos and galleries, and you can see aspects of their book, aspects of their work, and what they bring to the table. So that's my plug.
Talk about your tours. I know those are near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, my tours. If you want to see some of these places up close and personal, I give tours every year. We do one in Egypt. We call it the diplomatic tour because you are treated like royalty. We have armed guards. We are taken on private buses. We do private tours on jet. We go all through Egypt. And the real beauty of it is that most of these tours would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Ours are usually half of what the rate is. So we do tours in Egypt, Peru, and Mexico every year. So for that information, go to www.cliffdunning.com, and you'll see the tour banner on top.
If you ever want to come back and shoot the shit, but not as Cliff Dunning, so you don't get in trouble, you could come as Dun Cliffing. That's fine. Because I think getting you on rank speculation may be a whole lot of fun. Not that this wasn't. This was terrific. Thank you so much. Continued success with your show. Thank you for your thoughts and your recognition of the hard work it does go into doing a show. But this is, in fact, of labor and of love. And I'm glad that you see that, because I think that's really cool, because I never really think about these things. So, yeah, thank you so much for being with me. Folks out there, check out Earth Ancients. Check out everything he said. And once again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, and keep out of the heat unless you want to be in the heat.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, take care.
Okay, man.
Okay, we're going to do one more. Yeah!
All the old paintings on the tomb, they do the stand dance, don't you know? If they move too quick, they're falling down like a domino. All the buzz on men by the Nile, they got the money on a bet. Gold crocodiles, they snap their teeth on your cigarette. Foreign types with the hookah pipe say, walk like an Egyptian. The blonde waitresses take their trays, spin around and they cross the floor. They've got the moves. You drop your drink, then they bring you more. All the school kids so sick of books, they like the punk in the middle band. When the buzzer rings, they're walking like an Egyptian. All the kids in the marketplace say, walk like an Egyptian. Slide feet up the street, bend your back, shift your arm, then you pull it back. Legs hard, you know. So strike a pose on a Cadillac. If you wanna find all the cops, they're hanging out in the donut shop. They sing and dance. They spin the club, cruise down the block. All the Japanese with their yen, the party boys call the Kremlin, and the Chinese know. They walk the line like Egyptian. All the cops in the donut shop say, walk like an Egyptian. Walk like an Egyptian.